Even skeptics had hopes. Fauci seemed steady when events took unexpected turns, explaining that we were learning as we went along. He said the lockdown would be for 15 days to flatten the curve. When that didn't work, he explained why, argued that it should be extended, and much of the nation went along. In a United States exhausted by its hyperpolarized political scene, here was someone who had worked with both parties, advising every president since Ronald Reagan. For those on the right, he could be seen as an employee of and messenger for President Donald Trump. For those on the left, he was a longtime public servant who had headed the same institution, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, NIAID, since 1984, and played vital roles in the fights against AIDS and Ebola. There was a widespread sense that Fauci was the right man at the right time. But then there were flip-flops on masks. After claiming the science showed the masks were unnecessary, Fauci later said they were absolutely necessary, but wouldn't be for the vaccinated, until, eventually, they were. There were also disputes about lockdowns. Initially introduced as temporary to flatten the curve, they were later extended to become a new way of life in order to save lives. But then some states, like Florida, which didn't impose long and severe lockdowns, had lower age-adjusted mortality than states like New York, which did. Then another issue emerged that was not simply scientific, but also political. Since the earliest days of the pandemic, many regular people struggled to make sense of its origins. The Chinese Communist Party had claimed the virus emerged from a wet market, while denying any connection to virology labs located nearby. There was obviously a cover-up unfolding in China, with arrests of citizen journalists and detentions and disappearances of Wuhan physicians who witnessed the first cases and who would have had ideas about where it started. Various observers argued that there was reason to consider that COVID may have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and perhaps even may have been engineered by gain-of-function (GOF) research, in which a natural virus is made more contagious and lethal, ostensibly to see if the scientists can get ahead of nature, and to study it, how it operates, in order to make new vaccines or medications, or for biological warfare. GOF is so controversial that in 2014, President Barack Obama put a moratorium on it. In 2017, Drs. Fauci and Francis Collins, then director of the NIH, who had opposed the moratorium, succeeded in having it lifted. But Fauci asserted that the scientists who were in a position to judge the COVID situation concluded its origin was natural. The media followed suit and called those who thought otherwise conspiracy theorists. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and others called the possibility of a lab leak a conspiracy theory that had been debunked. In the meantime, a master narrative began to emerge. Once upon a time, life was relatively normal and safe. And then the pandemic came, and life as we knew it suddenly changed in awful ways. The only way out, the only path back to a world without COVID, would be to make a vaccine as quickly as possible. Until then, everyone would have to do their part to stop the spread, which meant that basic social functions would have to cease, including school for millions of children. Thousands of small businesses would have to close, and civil liberties rolled back. It would be a difficult time, but eventually we would have the vaccine, and COVID would be over, as long as everyone got it, of course. But then, who wouldn't want to? On this point, Bill Gates of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the largest private contributor to the WHO, was very direct. Quote, The ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good, is to create a vaccine, close quote, he said. If you asked researchers or most physicians in the spring of 2020 how long it normally takes to produce a vaccine safe enough to administer to patients, many would have pointed out that the average fast vaccine takes 7 to 10 years, and that the first vaccine might just be one of several required to end a given crisis, because often the first is not the best. This seemed too long. Gates predicted that there would be problems moving quickly because companies would have to produce a one-size-fits-all vaccine that could have different effects on different groups, including pregnant women, the undernourished, and people with existing comorbidities. Quote, "People like myself and Fauci," Gates said, "are saying 18 months to make the vaccine. If everything went perfectly, there will be a trade-off. We'll have less safety testing than we typically would have. We just don't have the time to do what we normally do." Close quote. The solution, he noted, was that, quote, "governments will have to be involved because there will be some risk and indemnification needed," close quote. In August, that solution was reached. As The Intercept reported on August 28th, quote, "an amendment to the PrEP Act stipulates that companies, quote, cannot be sued for money damages in court," close quote, over injuries caused by medical countermeasures for COVID. Such countermeasures include vaccines, therapeutics, and respiratory devices, close quote. The only exception to this immunity would be if death or serious physical injury is caused by willful misconduct. Indemnification for vaccines was, as discussed above, not unique. What was new was that the companies producing them were indemnified before the vaccine was even made and fully assessed, knowing it would all be done faster than ever before. As the nation agonized over mounting deaths, the race for a vaccine was moving quickly, if too opaquely for some. In September 2020, a number of scientists began openly worrying about the non-transparency of the vaccine trials and whether this could wind up affecting vaccine hesitancy. The New York Times ran several articles on this, reporting that AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Moderna had each withheld their study protocols from outside scientists and the public. Withholding protocols guarantees that outside researchers can't know how participants are